I appreciate anybody who comes by today who enjoys the um, history lesson. It's not as much of a history lesson today as it is a um, discussion on me and my son's trip to the Holocaust Museum that we took 2 days ago. Um, it was a very important trip. It is the second time I've been to the Holocaust Museum. The first time was when I was in 11th grade. I took a course called Holocaust Studies, and we went there, and it was a life-changing moment for me. It kind of cemented my 8th grade love of history and made me want to be able to be a historian and tell the truth. Um, so I'm going to start again. I've had a few hiccups today. I've wrote down most of my thoughts, so luckily I can restart and do this correctly. So um, here's my prepared remarks. So 6 million is a number so large that the mind can stop seeing the people inside of it. The United States Holocaust Museum is built to make that impossible. Today, I want to walk you through the museum in the order that me and my son experienced it. Everything from the way we woke up in the morning, entering the building, and receiving an identification card, through the rise of Nazis, the ghettos, the deportations, the camps, the mass murders, the liberation of the people who and then the people who chose to rescue others, even at cost of themselves in many cases, and finally the Hall of Remembrance and the eternal flame that burns there. So this is not my typical, usual, lighter History Unbuttoned video or live. You guys know I don't do a lot of lives. However, I am going to be changing that. And this was, after visiting that museum 2 days ago, I figured this was a good place to start, just because it's so fresh in my mind and it stuck with me so much. So I'm not here to turn tragedy into entertainment. That's why I listed it as education. I'm not here to use shock to gain views. I just feel that this is one of those things that you do and you talk about, and hopefully you can get other people to go and see this place and witness it for themselves. The people in the Holocaust, the people that were murdered, they weren't born as victims, and they weren't just numbers. And that's hard to remember when you just look at the way history portrays it, like 6 million Jews dead, like people, 6 million. Each one had a family. Each one had a name. They had beliefs, jobs. There are photographs of all of them in their lives. They had arguments with each other and with other people, just like everybody else. They had routines, inside jokes, plans for the rest of their lives. They had favorite foods. They were all people. So before we start, I do want people to understand that this discussion includes anti-Semitism, persecution, mass shootings, ghettos, concentration camps, murdered children, the condition of people found during the liberation. I'm going to keep it as factual and respectful as I can. I don't suggest children being part of this conversation until you're ready to discuss with them exactly what happened. And to be honest, I believe taking them to the Holocaust Museum might be the best course of action to give them the most honest truth. The Holocaust was a systemic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million European Jews by Nazi Germany, its allies, and collaborators. So I also want you guys to know millions of other people were persecuted and murdered under Nazi rule as well. The Roma, the Sinti, people with disabilities. Something a lot of people don't realize, Soviet prisoners of war disproportionately were murdered. Polish civilians, political opponents, Jehovah's Witnesses, and gay men. I also want to be honest about what this live is. Just going to this museum doesn't make me an expert in the Holocaust. I've taken, other than my high school course, probably 3 or 4 other actual dedicated Holocaust or World War II leads into the Holocaust type courses. And that doesn't make me an expert by any means. It doesn't make a lot of people an expert. I've read books, and the people that wrote the books, they're not even full experts. They just know what they know. They're each able to give us a certain portion of the story. So when I give you a number or describe an artifact, that's what the museum said to me, or what I could find from the research about the museum. I'm relying on the museum's research when I give you numbers and I give you facts. And when I tell you what I thought or how I felt, that's me, and that's what I have to say about it. Um, the museum does something really important with the order of the exhibition, the way it's set up. It takes you the whole way to the fourth floor, and it confronts you immediately with the result in 1945 when American soldiers, as soon as you hop off the elevator, it tells you right away, Liberation Day. It starts going into it, and what they found and how they documented it. But then almost immediately you take a left, and it starts it takes you back to 1933 and really starts hammering you with historical questions. How did a modern nation go from ordinary life to that? So it's definitely something. Hi, Puppy Crew. Thank you. It's definitely something that will shock you immediately. Um, but I'm going to start with my day immediately. I'm going to backtrack a little bit here. I'm going to let you guys know. So me and my son woke up about 5:30 in the morning in York, Pennsylvania. We headed for Washington. We had a timed entry. For the Holocaust Museum, there are limited amount of daily tickets, and you can get a ticket that day if they have them left. I recommend doing it a week ahead of time, a few days ahead of time. If you're a veteran, I think you can get in no matter what. Admission's free, but the app you use does cost $1 per ticket, kind of to verify who you are. We planned the drive. We planned everything around the drive, walking, we had a park and a garage and walk there. Security, all the things that can make a DC trip go sideways really fast. You have to plan everything out for DC. And a mile sounds short until you're walking a mile in heat and humidity and trying to get around people and stoplights, and there are police everywhere. You know how DC is. If you've ever been there, you understand. So the weather was good, smoky, cloudy from the fires in Canada. The traffic was pretty good because we bypassed most of it. The building sits pretty close to the National Mall. Once you get around it, though, it's not like the normal monuments. The shape of the building, the feeling of it is just more solemn. You start reading the quotes that are on the side of the building. There are a bunch of great quotes. In the future, my plan is to actually superimpose some of the photos I took with this video so you guys can see what I'm talking about. The architecture uses the familiar Washington stone, but the openings and the towers, brick, the steel, it's kind of an unsettling feeling. So we got there early because I plan early all the time. And me and him walked about a half a mile down. We saw the Washington Monument from afar, took some photos, stuff like that. We came back about 9:55, 10 o'clock. We got in line and entered the building. They went through our bags, security did, made sure everything was good. You enter the Hall of Witnesses, and it's just one of those things where the mood changes immediately. It's very solemn as soon as you walk in, and you pick up as soon as you walk in. There's these cards, and I wish I have it. It's upstairs, but me and my son each got a card. It's an identification card. It tells you a short story in like this big. It's gray and it's got like 6 pages. It shows you a photo and the birth year and the birth location of a person from the Holocaust. Some of them have endings where it's like this person lived the rest of their life in America. And then some of them, my son got one where it literally said he entered a camp and wasn't heard from after again. We swapped and read each other's stories because I like to learn and I like to read. So the enormous amount of cards in there, it just sets up the rest of the trip. The rest of because once you realize each card's a little different, each card is different, it just starts wowing you. Like these were people, all of them were people. So from there, you take this elevator to the 4th floor, as I was stating earlier. You go the whole way up because you start at the top and work your way down. You hop off the elevator, and the elevators, I don't know if this was done purposely. My elevator had 3 times more people than I would have been comfortable with in an elevator. Not that I like to be around people as is, but being that close and clumped in, it was definitely uncomfortable. You watch a little video on the screen, the doors open, you come out, and it's immediately Liberation Day videos on the wall. They have videos of the liberation of some of the camps. So, and that's something you see again later down the road, but it just gives you an idea of how horrible things are to come. So it flashes back to 1933 real quick as soon as you come around that corner. And the fourth floor follows the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party, and it does it in great detail. If you're not a fast reader, it does make it a little harder. There's a lot to read, there's a lot to watch, and there's a lot of people in front of every exhibit, especially in the beginning there when people are really taking their time. So maybe look for a time where you can adjust your reading skills and understand fully what's going on, because you really, this is a 4-hour ordeal, more maybe. So it starts with the rise of the Nazi Party and Hitler, the destruction of the democratic government, the creation of a police state, propaganda that you see. They show you the videos of the propaganda going on. The racial ideology is a huge part of it. They break down like the propaganda that they had, where it would tell you, look for this in a person, and that shows this. And oh, thank you, Rose. And it starts just showing you where their thought process was. So they literally tell you like the legal exclusion. This person is 1/4 Jewish, therefore they follow under these rules. And this person is 1/4 disabled. I mean, it's crazy. And then they start showing you the violence. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to do it more. I figured I'd start doing it with this. The refugee crisis before the war, how the Jewish people knew, not just the Jewish people, the Roma, all of them, the Gypsy, they all knew what was coming, and they tried to get out. They saw that their businesses were being destroyed, that things were really just going downhill, and they tried to apply for visas to every single country they could, and it just didn't work for them. And a lot of people, I did get the sense as I was reading the cards that a lot of the people writing these blamed America, blamed the other civilized countries for not doing more in the beginning. It's easy to look back and look at these atrocities and be like, we should have done more. But I think these things were so terrible and horrible that nobody could have foreseen this. Now, he did tell us, the Nazi Party did tell us this was their plan. Thank you, Rose. But they did not. It was so terrible, I don't think anybody really could grasp just how bad it would get. And this is before the killing centers. We get to that later, right? This was the separation to make people in Europe, especially in Germany, Italy, and the other Axis, make them feel like these people were their enemies. And another thing, they didn't even target the Jews immediately. It was the communists they went after, which surprised me. I mean, I knew that, but they really hammer it. Like, Hitler went straight after his political opponents and the other political parties and just was very determinate in his outcome. So, as a historian, the progression that I kept noticing, we often study the most dramatic moment because it's the easiest to recognize. This museum forces you to step back and study the steps before it, what led to it, how it happened, who wrote the rules and who repeated the lies, who stamped what form and why, what was enforced. Another thing I found interesting was the Gestapo and the SS. They weren't the original people keeping these rules. It was, I think they called them AS. It was a smaller police force that would tell on people and everything like that. So, it shows you who benefited from this, who looked away, and who convinced themselves that the next step was not their responsibility. So the Nazis, they did this pretty calculated. They presented everything like it was their racial ideologies were science. They had scientists, big name scientists, writing books and saying this and this and this is true. And that really was a big part of them being able to push this forward. So it classified human beings, and it taught children of a racial hierarchy. It controlled information, and it repeated the claim that Germany could be renewed only by removing these people that were not human in their eyes. So propaganda did not magically turn every viewer into a murderer, but it did prepare people to stop seeing their neighbors as individuals. So, the Nuremberg laws, people hear Nuremberg and they immediately jump to the trials. No, it was a place, and the Nuremberg laws of 1935, it turned the anti-Semitism into government policy. So, and they discuss all of this in the videos. They show you newspaper clippings of everything step by step. The Jewish people were stripped of their citizenship. Here's something that I found crazy is they have a timeline. Like if you were a teacher or if you were in college as a Jewish person, you had until or this date, they made you stop being a student. On this date, if you were a nurse, you were no longer a nurse. At this point, if you were a lawyer, that day, you were no longer a lawyer. You had that stripped from you. Doctors, every position of power or responsibility was stripped from them. And they had strict days that it happened. Jewish people were stripped of being citizens. They were called like members or something. Like they lowered them. They were barred from marrying or having relationships with anybody classified as German or related blood. The prejudice became an administrative system. Police, courts, schools, employers, doctors, landlords, they all received rules that they had to enforce. It's easy to be like, well, why did people not stand up? They couldn't. If you did, you were imprisoned. You were labeled just as equal as them, and life was very poor for you if you lived. The part that really bothered me, modern cruelty does not always arrive looking chaotic. Sometimes it just looks like order. It looks like the right forms were filled out, the right things were done, and we move forward. The government can multiply hatred through paperwork. Even in America, we see the red tape of everything and how it looks legit because it's government. And that's what they did. Only they didn't use it for anything positive. So we moved through the Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, the nationwide anti-Jewish program of November 9th and 10th in 1938, where they burned synagogues. They show videos of it and photos and accounts of people that were in the synagogues literally as they were being lit on fire. All Jewish businesses destroyed. Nobody punished for doing it because they were told to do it. Homes invaded. People beaten on the street, murdered. 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. 1938. This is before we ever could have even imagined. It was an organized public destruction that told the Jewish families that the law was no longer there to protect them. It told the attackers that the law would protect them. Then it started talking about the refugee crisis, which I had already touched on a little bit with you guys. And I'm torn. I am. I wish I could be like bad countries who didn't take people in. And they definitely try to make you feel that. And rightfully so. It was tough. Once people understood they needed to leave, leaving still required money, documents, transportation, permission to leave, and a country that was willing to accept them. The St. Louis, it was this boat. It carried 900 Jewish refugees in 1939. They went to Cuba. Cuba denied them. They went to Miami. Miami denied them. They went to Cuba. Cuba denied them. They went back and forth and just sat there. Nobody would accept these 900 people. And they were from pretty affluent families, people that probably knew leadership somewhere. The ship returned to Europe, and 254 passengers that were aboard that were murdered in the Holocaust. This is where the story gets a little uncomfortable when you look at the rest of the world outside of Germany. Nazi Germany created this persecution, and they hold the responsibility and only them. So this is not to pass that buck. But it is to give an idea. Other governments made choices about immigration, what refugees they'd accept, what they would do with the information they had. And it's not whether any other country could have saved everyone. It's could more people have been saved. I know America had many programs, and they talk about it, where certain people were widely accepted. That's how we got Albert Einstein, and many like him. We accepted artists, authors, scientists, if you guys are watch my page at all, I have a long form video about Operation Paperclip after the war and how we accepted the Nazi scientists. You look at that and you wonder, why couldn't we have accepted more before? More not Nazi, more Jewish people before. Um, I'm not saying accept them all. I mean, there is a situation where being overrun, we couldn't have helped. We were coming out of a horrible time in our country. We couldn't have saved all these people and still built ourselves up to win the war eventually. So there was a balance there that needs to be understood. So do you think people should have understood, like, seen the ugly politics when it became from just ugly politics to organized persecution? Um, I know this country right now, we look at one or two events a month or a year, and we pin it as, this is horrible, persecution, this and that. I think that there was a more clear than one or two events a month. We literally saw it being okay to destroy people's businesses and being rewarded for doing so, right? Thank you. It is. There was a very clear line there. And, you know, I understand the being terrified by the German citizens. But there had to be a point where people could have rose up and done something. They should have seen something. But you can't judge history from the present. Hey, how's it going, LP? Thank you for stopping by. Um, so, oh, thank you. So I have written on here about the rusty milk can that was to hide part of an archive from the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto, I'll get to that. That was a horrible situation. Um, um, let's go down to my notes further. So, after Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1491, the mobile killing units, those were the people literally sent out to the ghettos and other areas just to murder local collaborators, murder entire Jewish communities in fields, forests, ravines, and they prepare pits. Literally, they'd have the Jews dig a pit. They would massacre them, and then they'd fill it in. And then later on, they'd go back, undig the bodies, and burn them to dust to try to hide what they had done. This matters a lot. This shows people that the Holocaust didn't just happen in concentration camps. It didn't happen in just gas chambers. People weren't just gassed to death and went to sleep. The camps were central, and enormous numbers were murdered and just open air shootings during events. Those crimes required a lot of the concentration camps required a lot of documentation and stuff to happen. Put on a train, organize supplies, do this. These killing units, they didn't need that. They just went where they were told to go, used the bullets, and moved. Anyway, to keep going on, as you go down from the fourth floor to the third floor, I think it was the third floor, you get to a lot more stuff. The deportation rail car, I want to get to that, but I don't want to go there yet. I will say, as me and my son stood beside the rail car, you notice just how small it is compared to everything else. And they discuss 100 people, 150 people in sweltering heat, in freezing cold, shoved in there, no bathroom breaks. They were so heavily laden that the trains could only go 30 miles per hour, which was like half or a third of what they could go. And that made, and they break down just due to the weight. This is the kind of stuff that they dealt with on a daily, like on a basis, trying to get them from here to there. And a lot of people would die on the way, So, yeah, you don't even need to manufacture any stories about the rail car. The simple facts of it are terrifying enough. The people inside, they thought they'd need their stuff, they were still thinking about tomorrow. Where are we being relocated? What's going to happen? What are we doing? They didn't make it. They were sent somewhere without their stuff. And that should have been, they should have known that what was coming. I mean, not should have known, but so the concentration camp expanded across Nazi-controlled Europe. Prisoners included, of course, the Jewish people, the Soviet prisoners of war, the Poles, after they took over Poland and put their enemies from Poland in there, the Roma, the Sinti, political opponents, the gay men, Jehovah's Witnesses, anybody that they disagreed with. People were forced into labor, starvation. The disease in the camps was rampant. The bug problem, the bugs were diseased. There was no food. The immune systems of people were already bad. So even the people that weren't murdered faced such a terrible, horrible life and mostly did not live. They actually called it, I forget the exact wording, but they discuss it a lot at the museum. It was pretty much death through labor. They never intended for the people, even the healthy ones that they used for labor, their plan was to use them as a resource that was usable. Use them up, let them die, get new. And it did two things for them. It helped them get rid of the people they didn't want, and it got stuff done for them, creating munitions, creating other clothing for the war, helping create that war machine Germany was so famous for. Do their blitzkriegs and their entire campaign. It was fueled on slave labor. So Auschwitz. That's one of the ones people know the most. It became the largest Nazi concentration camp and killing center complex. Trains literally arrived from across Europe, from all the areas that the Germans were taking over. Any Jews in those areas were being shipped through this camp. They literally had, the rails would split, right? Normal rails would keep going, and the other ones would split. And the one that split would go straight into the camp, drop them off, and they would choose right there. They'd have people, you live, you die, you die, you live, you die. And they wouldn't say it, but they'd separate them. And they knew which line was what. They'd immediately send some to the gas chambers, or there was one story they discussed that if a lady knew what was happening, they discussed, one of the German soldiers said, if they knew a lady was going, like she started panicking and screaming, they would calmly lead her out back and shoot her with a low caliber silenced gun just to keep everybody else calm. It was, the planning that went into it. They would shave heads. They had bags of hair that they would turn around and then use to make felt clothing and stuff like that. They had, it was crazy. The survivor testimony of these people, the surviving testimony, and even the testimony of people who did not survive but were able to get word out, is key to letting us know there's a room where you walk into it, and it's called like the Voices of Auschwitz, and it's just the survivors talking about what happened and how they survived it, and everything like that. The German records alone, they tell us what the perpetrators planned. They tell us what was going to happen and how they planned it. There was a group of German elite who met at a mansion, and the plan of it was to discuss the final solution. There was no discussion, though. They talk about how they sat there and drank and smoked cigars and took it as a time to rest, because they already had their plan. They already knew what the final solution meant. They knew where they were going with their plans. Let me go down to here to where one of the things, this hit me back when I was in 11th grade, and it hit me now, was, hi, Psyche Pansy. The shoe room will always be one of the most moving and upsetting spots in the whole Holocaust Museum to me. Me and my son discussed it at length. You walk in, and it's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of shoes. And you think every pair of those was a person. And the shoes you see, they don't even scratch the surface. When you look at the photos of the warehouses of belongings, the forks and the spoons, the shoes, the clothing, the luggage, it doesn't even begin to touch it. But just seeing it, with the oven behind it, it makes you at least start to grasp the terribleness of this, of what happened. Um, so those shoes, they look ordinary because they're old shoes, but they were someone's shoes. They wore it. They chose those shoes. They chose them that morning, or whenever they left their house. They walked in them, and they expected to need their shoes the next day. Um, they just didn't get to walk again. Um, so something else on this floor that I really, this part I say enjoyed, but enjoyed isn't the word. Was it teaches you about human resilience. Um, it addresses the hiding and the resistance. And something that I said I'd get to it, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. Um, it was crazy, and I think there were two that they discuss. Um, the Warsaw people, they held off, and they were fighting back. Uh, so the German army literally just burned buildings down, pushing them back and back until there was nothing left, and they took them all out. They killed them all. Um, it was quite a story of human perseverance, and that they knew what was happening. And this they start discussing a lot of the other ghettos and the Jewish coalitions that were put in charge of the ghettos. The Germans would trust the coalitions. The coalitions would in turn convince their constituents that everything was going to be okay, just do what you're told, just keep living. And sometimes these coalitions would learn from outside sources what was really going to happen. And you'd see some acts of resistance if they knew. Sometimes they didn't know, and they would just hope. So on this floor, there was also let me open the door for my dog. On this floor, there was also the Anne Frank section, and I didn't spend a lot of time in the Anne Frank section, and it wasn't because I didn't want to see the Anne Frank section. It's just because it's a story. We've all read the book, and I love the story and all of that, but I wanted to spend my time elsewhere. I was reading a lot of things, and people kind of push you through. So that was really it was a good spot to stop, but I didn't spend a lot of time there. You know, the ghetto uprisings and the legacies of this, it's unfair to judge these victims why they didn't uprise more, though. Like I was getting into, the coalitions that were above them and the Germans that were above them, they were saying, you're going to be fine, just deal with this through the war. The Nazis controlled the food, the weapons, movement, information. They would use families against families. And they would the threat of collective punishment. So they would even punish the Jews for things that they had nothing to do with. A good example of that was there was an assassination attempt on one of the German high-ranking officials, and not only did they find and kill the people who tried to assassinate, they then turned around and found that those people's families and assassinated and killed them. And then they went to the town, and killed every single person in the town. They rehomed a few of the kids, but other than that, they killed them all. So one of the rooms as you're walking through is called the Tower of Faces. It's 1,000 photographs where it shows and I'm going to butcher the name here, and I apologize. I'll fix it later, or I'll look it up. The Jewish community of USHMM. Weddings, the children, the religious life, their work, vacations, families. There was one photo there that really stuck out to me. It was in the shape of a heart. And it was a man and a woman, obviously, like they were in love. Their vacations, the ordinary days of them just living. In September 1941, the German and Lithuanian forces murdered 30,500 Jewish people from that community and the surrounding areas. Most of those people did not survive. These photographs matter, and the reason they matter, you're standing there, you're like, so the reason they matter is because we can't let their death be the only thing we remember of these people. We have to remember them as they were, as people, as something that shouldn't be forgotten. These people were humans. They had lives. They were happy, and it was ended. Um, the people in those photographs, they were individuals, and the crime destroyed the individuals, and sadly, history has lumped them into one category. And so that's one of the things the Holocaust Museum does really well, is giving people a story. It's impossible to give 6 million people a story, but all 6 million had a story. All the Soviets in the prisoner of war camps that were murdered, they all had stories. So when I say 6 million, I mean, you've got to understand, it wasn't 6 million. It was 30 million. I mean, it was considerably more. It was 6 million Jewish people. Um, because it's the Holocaust Museum, they spend more time on the Holocaust rather than the rest of the deaths. But they do touch on it. And I may do a video at some point where I discuss the Soviet portions of everything. The Soviets really, America was awesome in World War II. The Soviets were the reason World War II was as successful as it was. The bodies they threw at the war, that's a conversation for another time, though. So you get to the second floor: liberation, rescue, and justice, and survival. This is the final floor of the permanent exhibition, and it covers the liberation, the resistance, and the rescue, and the defeat of Nazi Germany, post-war justice, displaced survivors, and the effort to rebuild lives. The tone changes, but it's not like it's not a simple happy ending, because it's still, to this day, it's not a simple happy ending. Um, the so the Allied troops, they entered the camps, and it isn't just America. In fact, America did their part, and other places did theirs. Other countries, British, the Canadian, the Soviets, they did not encounter the same camps or arrive at the same time. Not every camp was liberated on the day. I mean, it took a long time for us to take back each and every country. And there's these maps, and they do a good job even previous to this, where they'll show you the map of Germany invaded Poland this year, and it'll show you, and it'll highlight it in red. And then they went to France and here, and take Norway. And at the end, it shows you the same maps kind of in reverse, but they're not the same. They're how it was freed. Something I found interesting that I didn't know, and I want to do further research on: Norway housed a lot of Nazi soldiers, a lot of German soldiers, and it was one of the last to be freed. And the reason was, it was way north, and they figured if they could just take out the capital, the people in the north would be like, we lost, give up, and it worked. I digress. So get back to my list here where I was talking. The troops, they went into these camps, and it was a nightmare. It was horrible. Some of the generals, Patton and Eisenhower, they went and took pictures with the survivors and stuff, and sent it out. So they wanted to see just how terrible this was, and let the American public and the whole world know this is what happened. It is so bad that there are no words for it. And people that are that famous, going out and doing that, was key to spreading the truth of what happened. So we the Allies get to these camps. We see the starvation, the disease, the unburied bodies. I mean, there's so many horrible, terrible videos and photos of bodies. They don't even look real in half of them, because they're black and white, and they're in different states of decay that make them look horrible. So bodies some people died after liberation even. So we would free a camp, and we would say, here's food, and they would eat themselves to the point where they would die, because their body couldn't handle that level of nutrition anymore. Their bodies had been pushed beyond recovery, beyond medical care. So many soldiers, they had seen combat, and they said they still, like bloody, terrible combat, D-Day, other battles that were horrible, living conditions that were horrible, and they said even they lacked the words strong enough to discuss and explain what they had found. You know, as a veteran, I didn't get to partake in battles. I didn't get to um, be overseas in bloody areas. But this part still hits differently from my limited scope. I was unfortunate enough to do a duty that helped out the army in Kuwait with repacking ice on people coming back. And I say ice; it's not really ice, but same idea. And then I'd work with the Marines and the Navy to carry the casket to the plane, and they'd go to Dover. And they wouldn't call it a ceremony because you only get one ceremony, and you can't have your ceremony before you get back to where you're going. So we would give them a ceremony, is what it was, but it wasn't. It was usually 2 or 3 Air Force, a couple Army, a couple Navy. I think the only Navy guy, and a couple Marines. There were 6 Marines. They were interesting guys. The only Navy guy I think was the chaplain. But it was that this kind of thing hits harder because I think about how much that messed with me, and I look back at these soldiers who went through battles, terrible battles, and to then say this about that. These were not men who were unfamiliar with death and destruction. Uh, they were used to process terrible things, keep moving, keep on moving, and they understood that what they were seeing was that terrible that they had to document it, they had to video it, they had to take pictures because people wouldn't believe how horrible this is. Photographs, films, reports, and witness statements became part of the evidence before the war even ended. And this goes back to what I said earlier, guys. When I said that we didn't open our borders enough because we didn't understand. Yes, Hitler and the Nazis, they told us what they were going to do. They didn't hide anything. They were honest, brutally honest. But there's a difference between being brutally honest and seeing it and it happening. Because even some of the worst genocides in history aren't like this. There's and believe me, I'm not glossing over any genocide or anything. I'm not saying any of it's okay. But there's a difference between lining up 6,000 people and shooting them in a pit, and then the horrible atrocities that were done to the Jewish people and the Soviet people and everybody in these concentration camps and these prisoner of war camps. The Nazis did not just imprison, they did not just shoot and move. They did do that too. They tortured and ended more than anything can be explained. Anyway, the rescuers, they had the courage, without turning it into a comfortable ending. We saved the day. They didn't do that. No, they knew what they had to do. So something else I found, and I'm going to be doing it moved me a lot. And I've always loved the movie Schindler's List. It was probably one of my favorite movies and my favorite stories of heroism. And if you guys look at my page, I did do a story on, and it was crazy because I've done like 3 or 4 of the things I've done stories on, I found in this museum. One of them was that Anton Schmidt story I did, the 2-minute and 30-second one. And his story's on this wall, right? Of all these people that saved Jewish people, even at the cost of them. And there are stories like his that don't have happy endings, where they gave their lives to save people. So this exhibition, and it really stayed with me. And I'm going to start making, I think I'm going to start doing once every 2 weeks. I'm going to start releasing a 2-minute, 30-second video on these people, each one, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter, depending on how much information I can find. Each person that, and I'll do maybe 10, 15 of them and turn it into a long one, of people that did everything they could to save people during the war. These are people that they saw other human beings in danger, and what did they do? They went beyond anything you could imagine. They resisted, and they risked prison, torture, death to them and their family. to feed, transport, document, and protect people during the war. In a time where most people were collaborating because it was a fear of death, people in Germany, you learn a lot of them didn't collaborate because they agreed. They collaborated out of extreme fear. Um, so the people that took that fear and did something about it, those are the people that deserve their story told on every platform that you can think of. That's my intent. So I don't want you guys to think too that this rescuer section was just put there to give people a happy-go-lucky feeling about humanity. Rescue was rare. These people that did this, they were rare. There weren't a lot of them, right? This didn't just, it wasn't like, hey, every 30 people, there's one that's saving people. No, it was every 400,000, there was a dude that hid 20 in his basement at the risk of his own life. It was, I'm exaggerating, but it was a lot, or it was not a lot of people. But it does show you that these stories prove that choice did still exist, even under occupation and dictatorship. They didn't let, they don't erase the collaboration or indifference, but they do make it harder to just accept that answer. So here we go. Here's one I wrote down. One of the most powerful examples, Les Chambon-sur-Lignon, and the surrounding Protestant villages in southern France. There was a pastor there. I don't speak French, but Tromé, maybe Tromé, and his wife Magda, another pastor, Thies, and local residents. They helped shelter thousands of refugees, thousands of Jews. Many of them were children. People in these areas opened their homes and schools. They forged identification papers and ration cards, moved refugees between safe places, and in some cases, they even guided them towards Switzerland. As a Christian, I this is the part I don't just reduce it to a nice story about faith. They believed what they said in a time now where faith is a slogan for a lot, maybe just a false identity. For me, for example, I say I have faith and I say I believe and everything like that, but you've got to wonder how you would act in this situation. These people, it wasn't just they say they believed. They didn't do it to make themselves feel righteous. They did it because it's who they were, and it was important to do to them. Spare beds, meals, false paper warnings, routes through the mountains, and a willingness to accept the danger of their own homes. The Germans had already proven that they would annihilate entire villages at this point. Like they would burn down, murder every man, woman, child, and if they were not Jewish descent, they would give those children to other families in Germany. But they saved people by acting as though the person at the door really was their neighbor. The community, it had a historical memory of persecution that community did. So the Protestants there, they knew what it meant for the government and majority culture to treat a religious minority as dangerous. And that not that memory made them want to act, but it was probably subconsciously part of what happened. History does not automatically make anyone good, but it gave them the moral aptitude, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, to recognize what was happening and protect where they could. And what's cool about this one is the wall of heroes, for lack of a better term, the wall of rescuers is incredible. But this wasn't just one person. This was an entire city, town, and towns surrounding it that took the courage to make it a community practice. And the ability to keep the secret is amazing. They were able to keep it quiet and make it keep happening without fear of a neighbor turning them in. And that was a real concern, neighbors turning in neighbors. An entire network. So, Denmark, there's a Denmark. So they do discuss a lot of the cities and towns and countries that were taken over. and how they reacted to the German rules that were being passed down. And I'm not going to lie, there were a lot of really interesting ones. Italy, I think it had said, Mussolini, as terrible as he was, he refused to treat the Jews the way that Germany did. What else? There was Denmark. They refused to surrender their Jewish neighbors. They did so there's an exhibition there that discusses in 1943 how German authorities prepared deportations, and ordinary citizens and resistance members, police, government figures, doctors, clergy, fishermen, and others, they all got together and helped Jews reach the coast. In more than in barely 3 weeks, they were able to save 7,000 Jews and 700 non-Jewish relatives cross into Sweden. You know, so once again, this is where the museum and how it's broken into stages of things happening becomes important again. Rescue was possible not only because of brave people that acted in the final moment. This shows you that even the whole time things were happening. The Danish institutions and social norms that had resisted some of these measures before the deportation crisis was very well noted in the documents. People had not been spent, or people in Denmark, they hadn't spent years being brainwashed, into thinking their neighbors were less human. So that probably did help in their thought processes. You got to look at the full picture too. The Denmark people, they had geography, timing, and nearby neutral countries that did help them make better choices. They weren't a way where there was no way to do this secretly or on time, like in time. So there are other things to look at why. And as a historian, you should always look at why and how, and not just the event itself. So let's see where I wrote down a lot of little stories to discuss, but I want to save those for videos to give the people and places their actual due diligence and the respect they deserve, because each one deserves a full story and more time than I can give. I mean more research than I can offer. So this leads to justice and rebuilding. Everybody knows the Nuremberg trials. The post-war trials, they attempted to establish legal responsibility for what happened. There was an international military tribunal at Nuremberg, and they prosecuted some of the major Nazi leaders, and then later on prosecuted less and less, I don't want to say less responsible, but less critical people. When I read through a lot of the different things that happened, who was prosecuted and all of that, and it made me wonder what kind of, you read, these people got death, these people got life in prison, these people got a slap on the hand, and some of it's not even. Some of it will be like, this doctor horribly maimed 8,000 Jews in 2 weeks, and he got life in prison. But this nurse, she was at the entry door checking vitals for 2 months, and she got death. And it makes you wonder how they, which I would like to do some research into, how they decided who got what punishment. Did we reward people who told the truth? Yeah, so the trials were incomplete, and many of the perpetrators escaped punishment. A lot of them ran to other countries and stuff like that. And through time, many were found. They helped establish government offices and military orders. So it's hard to give them individual responsibility. So everybody had their responsibilities in the situation. So after the war, it didn't restore a world that had been destroyed. And that goes for all of the war. Can you imagine Soviet Russia and the amount of people they lost trying to put their lives back together? I think it was a considerable amount of war-aged men in the whole world that were literally just gone, never to continue with families. Um, but for the survivors of the Holocaust, there was no home for them to return to. There was no property for them to get back. The gold that they had tried to leave with, the paintings they had acquired, um, the silverware they used, the clothing they had purchased, their businesses they spent lives and their forefathers' lives creating. It was all gone, destroyed, and there was no way to fairly give this back to them. Displaced persons camps, they became temporary communities. People had to band together. Survivors did everything they could to find relatives. They emigrated, married, had children. They built new careers and created new lives all through Europe, Israel, and the United States and elsewhere. Um, you know, there's a lot of something that it does interestingly is at the end it does discuss the Palestinian um, resettling of the Jews and how England, who owned Palestine at the time, how they were very against allowing the resettling there in their land. But eventually, like I said, I'm not very, very well versed in the settling of Palestine, but the British, whose land it was, were not for it first, and I know they forced people away as much as they could until different treaties were signed and everything like that. So, permanent exhibition ends with the survivor and rescuer testimony, and after floors filled with Nazi records and machinery and persecution, um, the final voice of the entire place does not belong with the Nazis. It is given back to the people that were that the regime had tried to erase, and it gives the power back to the people who were almost stripped of it. Um, Me and my son, we sat down for about 15, 20 minutes afterwards. We just talked about the different exhibitions and whatnot. Um, it was a tough thing to take a 15-year-old to, but it was something that he needed to go to and needed to understand. Um, you know, so after we're done with the permanent exhibition, we went to the Hall of Remembrance, and it's quiet, six-sided. Names of the concentration camps and killing centers are inscribed on the walls around it, and then they have an eternal flame at the center. You can light a memorial candle. So there's an inscription from Deuteronomy. I can never say it. Deuteronomy about guarding memory and teaching you what you have seen to your children and grandchildren. Being there with my son made it impossible to treat this place as a decoration or as just some random spot. It really just, it was great to spend that time with him, knowing that he is my legacy and my future. You know, it was impossible to treat that place as just a decoration. We spent hours in that museum, hours, walking through and seeing what happens when people are reduced to categories and numbers, and it was important. So, I sat there. I internally discussed with myself and prayed, and spoke afterwards with him about the what we had seen. So, and you guys got to understand. So, as a historian, and I call myself that loosely because I'm still in the process of always learning, always trying to see more, always trying to learn both sides. But remembrance doesn't mean comparing every political dispute to the Holocaust. In fact, that cheapens the Holocaust. And to me, I find it disgusting. Careless comparisons where you trivialize the Holocaust or you call people Nazis or whatever. I've always found it to be a disgusting, gross practice, a horrible practice. And people that do it, I try not to judge people. And it's hard for me not to judge people who throw it around like it's a random word. This museum reminds you why it is a disgusting practice to do that. You don't. And remembrance means studying how this propaganda and dehumanization the legal exclusions, the bureaucracy, the war, the collaborators and collaboration, the indifference to human lives, the resistance, the strength and adversity of the survivors and the people that that tried to stick it out. How it diminishes them, and it shouldn't. We should refuse to let these victims be turned into anonymous numbers. We should. We should always do our best to remember them. So, that was my trip to the Holocaust Museum. We learned a lot. And like I said earlier, I enjoyed my time there. I always do. I'm going to go back. I'm going to take more videos and photos if I can. Try not to do so in a blatant way to be ignorant. But it helps me remember things. And so that's probably what I'll do again. I plan to start going there more often, I think. And not just there, DC as a whole. After we were done here, we walked around DC for another hour and a half. And then we went to the Air and Space Museum. Before we went to the Air and Space Museum, we walked through a few Smithsonian exhibits. One about America 250. It had some really cool things in there. It had Edison's original light bulb. It had the first computer of the United States. It had Abraham Lincoln's banner from one of his things. It was just an amazing little exhibit. It was quick and easy. We ate lunch at McDonald's. Went to the Air and Space Museum. That really cool thing. I might do a video on that here in a day or two. I don't know. But I do know that Washington, D.C. is incredible. It's so full of museums and history. So that was 2 days ago that we did those museums and the Smithsonian's. Yesterday, we took our time. We woke up. We stayed at a little place called Citizen M the night before. And beautiful little hotel. Small rooms. Very small. King-size bed. But a beautiful room. Parking was hard to find. So the next day we woke up early. Went to McDonald's again because there's not a lot of cheap options in DC and not made of money sometimes. Actually making these videos costs quite a bit of money, believe it or not. So we went to McDonald's and then we drove. I thought, you got to remember, I'm not from DC. I don't mean to block my mic. I'm not aware of what's where. So I was talking to ChatGPT and I said, where can I park to see the Lincoln Memorial? I want to see the reflecting pool in the Lincoln Memorial. That would make me happy. And it goes, park here at the tidal basin, whatever. So I park and we see something in the distance and I'm like, got round top, not a flat top, but maybe that's it. So we walk over there. It's about a half a mile and it was the Jefferson Memorial. So we took some photos and read through the Jefferson stuff at the basement. Amazing, beautiful memorial. And the view of the Washington Memorial from there is spot on, beautiful across the river. So that was really cool. So then we walk back to the car and I'm like, on maps, like walk to the Lincoln Memorial. And the Lincoln Memorial is about 1.1 miles, which doesn't sound like much. And me, I would have walked it because when I'm not feeling sick and vertigus, I do love to walk. It's kind of my big form of exercise, is being able to walk around on the days I don't feel like garbage. So I'm like, let's walk it. And it was hot, smoky air from Canada and humid as all get up. So my son's like, I'd rather not. So we drove Constitution Avenue, found a parking spot, got there about 9:10 in the morning. And the problem is you can't pay for your parking spot on that road until 9:30 in the morning. Once again, there's all kinds of intricacies to visiting DC. And I took a picture of the thing, parked, and we started walking towards Lincoln Memorial, which was about a third of a mile, fourth of a mile. And as soon as it hit 9:30, I was on the phone, beep, bought my parking spot. Probably risked a ticket, but I wanted to get there. Got to the Lincoln Memorial, and it was beautiful. I mean, I have a video of me walking the whole way up the stairs to the Lincoln Memorial that I'll post at some point. They have the Emancipation Proclamation on the wall. They have the Gettysburg Address on the wall. They have so much just amazingness. We met a really nice lady from, I believe, Oklahoma. She took a photo of me and my son for me. And then she said, you need to go check out the World War II memorial. So we started walking out, took some photos and videos of the reflection pool, which is shut down right now. It's drained, but it's still cool to see. It's cool to be there. The fences are a little further back than I would have thought. They don't let you in at it right now. They're supposed to be doing some warranty work to it. We'll see. We walked about a half a mile on the, if you're walking away from the Lincoln Memorial, right-hand side. We passed one of the World War II, like all the soldiers. It's really cool. I took some videos and pictures that I'll post at some point. And then we passed the World War I memorial, which is not very big. It's actually kind of small. And we got to the World War II memorial. And that's one of those where I want to make a video of me walking all around. I got to get there super early in the morning before anybody else. And I want to do all the way around it, like a video of every single state, uninterrupted. It's not going to be easy, but I would like to do that. We stayed there for a little bit. It was pretty. You can dip your feet in the pool there. I mean, they recommend it, but I didn't. And then we walked back to the car and drove home. Traffic wasn't bad on the way home. So taking my son to DC was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had with him. I enjoyed it a lot. It was great going to the Holocaust Museum first, that being our very first stop, with how solemn it is, how heavy it is. And then we were able to kind of talk about it, discuss it, and then move on to happier exhibits such as the Air and Space Museum, which I learned a lot about the Wright brothers, to be honest. And one of the other cool things was, I said to my son, we were coming down this escalator, and I said, that's a Minuteman III. That's what I worked on. That's what I spent my entire adult life fixing and working on. And he's like, how do you know? And I said, well, they don't look like that anymore. They've got less green, more black on them. But the shape is very obviously Minuteman III. I said, it's not a Minuteman 1 or 2. You can tell by the way it's shaped. And we get down there, and sure enough, it was a Minuteman III. And he got to see just how tall they are, how big they are. They're not quite as big as the other missiles, but they are fairly large. So that was cool. Like I said, I may do a video on that. It doesn't have as much of a meaning to me as you know, even though I was Air Force and Space Command for most of my life. It just didn't mean quite as much to me as the Holocaust Museum did. And I think that's a good thing, because the Holocaust Museum is one of those places that everybody should visit. And if any of you ever want to visit and meet down there, and we can do some walking around together, I'm no expert about DC. And if any of you are, I would love to join you for it. But it'd be cool to do some of these things as a group and discuss among us what there is and what has happened. You know, so anyway, guys, I took 1 hour and 8 minutes of your time. I'm appreciative of anybody who has come by. It says 44 total viewers on TikTok, and who knows how many on YouTube or Facebook. Could be 0. To be honest, I don't care. I just wanted to get off my chest the visit. I wanted to go live. I want to start doing it a little more. I love my 2.5-minute videos. I love my 2-minute videos, my daily facts that are 30 seconds. I even love making the 5 to 8-minute videos for you guys. But sometimes there's just nothing better than hopping on a live and discussing something. Thank you to all who listened. I don't like taking history and making it political. I love to take history and try to understand it as if I had been there at that time. I had what I felt. I'm sure the other person did not agree. I had a discussion on Threads this morning with a Civil War historian that I follow, and I love reading what they post daily. It's called like Civil War Daily or something. Hop on Threads, History Unbuttoned. You can see my discussion with them. And I don't say that because you don't monetize on Threads. It's just whatever. I don't think. I'm not monetized on anything. I just want you guys to know that. I do this because I love history. But we had quite a good discussion, Civil War discussion. I felt he was very anti-Robert E. Lee, and I am very ambivalent Robert E. Lee. Like, take him or leave him. I think he was a genius and a great tactician. I think Grant was a genius and a great tactician. I think each had their own motivating factors for doing what they did. and I don't see them as evil, either of them. I see it as history, and I wasn't there, and I can only discern what I can discern, and I can only teach and understand what I can teach and understand. So I thought our discussion was productive. He was under the impression that Lee was one of the worst generals of all time, and I'm under the impression that for his time he was exceptional. Grant was exceptional. A lot of those generals were exceptional. To be able to stand back and understand. And he kept saying things like, well, he lost at Gettysburg. And I was like, yes, decisively so. And in fact, that's what led a lot of people to think he was terrible. But the things he did beforehand, some of the decisions he made, Anyway, I digress. I'm off topic. I wanted to thank you all again for stopping by. Roses Bite Back, thank you so much for being here. You're amazing. LP, you're awesome. Psychic, I love you. You guys are all really, I'm appreciative. I really am. I hope to come back live. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow again. I want to start doing this a couple times a week, and really I should start doing it at a given time. Right now, my problem is I'm not a very timely person. I'm always early when I make a schedule. I always do things when I say I'm going to do them. But going live the same day every day, I don't know which days I'm going to have vertigo or a migraine. I don't know which days I'm going to be sick. I don't know which days I'm going to have to hang out with my daughter while she is the fierce warrior princess that she is, which she is. I've also got my oldest son in town. He visits once a year for 3 weeks. So I've been trying to spend a lot of my time with him. And that's what this trip was really about. He said he never wants to go back to DC. I said, man, you're missing out because we only got to see 2 museums and 3 monuments. You're missing out, man. So we'll see how it plays out. And I want to apologize. I look like a total mess today, but it is humid here. It is so humid, and those fires are just messing with everything. So anyway, if you guys want to, I'll repost this on my YouTube as a video. So if you missed some of it, you want to hear what I had to say about the Holocaust Museum and its impact on me and all of that, you will be able to do it. History Unbuttoned on YouTube. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that on here. I don't know if TikTok will publish it. I would love them to, but I don't know if they publish it. So anyway, you guys have fun and don't work too hard. And till next time.